Guess what's new in the news again? This week, we have 3 articles on healthy intestinal bacteria and their importance. You may have heard us say that intestinal bacteria is now considered an organ, weighing in at 3.3 pounds. Do you think that this balance of trillions of bacteria is important? You bet it is.
Very important. And we just think of stool as something to get rid of because it's kind of smelly and we all go yuck when we hear that.
And wash your hands.
Wash your hands. And actually, those microbes have a ton of responsibility in our body. They keep us healthy. There was a study that was done in the journal called Nature in August of 2013 from the University of Copenhagen that did a genetic analysis of gut microbes in 292 Danish people. And what they found is about 25% of those people had 40% less of the number of microbes than normal people do. And did it make a difference? Again, you bet it did. It put them at risk for certain kinds of things like inflammation and problems with being overweight. And of course, we know that the ecosystem is extremely complicated and that we need to take care of it.
Well, this is why it's so important that we have enough good bacteria to crowd out the bad bacteria. And what's the relationship between the bacteria and obesity?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. If you have fewer bacteria than you should by 40% or so, what happens is you tend to gain weight. And if you put these people on a diet, a low-fat diet, for about 6 weeks, it tends to restore it. It's kind of interesting that we look at this and see that happening that way because you really wouldn't expect that. So it's important, even for people who are overweight, to restore their microbes, the balance in their gut in a more normal way.
I think we have a preponderance of people that are low in the friendly bacteria because of so many antibiotics. This is why we frequently talk about how people have infections, for example, that are resistant to antibiotics because there's too many antibiotics and they kill out all the good bacteria.
Well, there are a lot of other factors too. I mean, you look at the things that are in the environment that are toxic, that have a profound effect on us, the things that are in our food, in the air, and a lot of the drugs that we take.
And look at all the antimicrobials that are so popular now.
For sure.
You see them every place to clean your hands, but they're not just in hand sanitizers. They're also in soaps and toothpaste.
And there's more than one ecosystem in the body too. The gut's just one. You have some in the nasal passages, they're in the vagina, they're on the skin, they're in your ear, and they're all different and unique. And when we disturb that system, a lot of things happen to us that are a challenge. If you have the wrong microbes in the gut, things will happen that will keep you from being able to have be able to make vitamin K and vitamin B5 and B6 and biotin. You won't be able to metabolize the hormones that our body metabolizes, or the carcinogens, or some of the xenobiotics, the toxic things that are in the environment that get into our gut. Won't be able to make butyrate, which is a very important chemical that sustains the colon because it's a major metabolic fuel of the colon.
Another thing that's frequently overlooked is the appendix, because the appendix actually stores probiotics and lets them out into our intestinal tract as needed.
Right.
And so I would just think, I don't know that there's a study on this or not, but I would just think that someone who had had an appendectomy should probably be a good candidate for taking probiotics.
Oh, I think most of us are candidates for taking probiotics. That's right.
Anyway.
When you look at the blind sac, the appendix, and know that there's a storage there of microbes, when there's an infection that goes through the gut, what happens is you can't get the infection to go into the blind sac that's full because it's already full, and it's continually exuding material from it that has a lot of activity in the chemicals that make up the surface layer and also the kinds of microbes that live there. And when you think of the complexity of that ecosystem, it's much like a rainforest. If we have something like a wildfire going through a rainforest, you're not going to collect a bunch of seeds and just kind of throw them out there and think you're going to restore that forest. It's going to take centuries for that to happen. And in the gut,
and we don't have centuries.
Well, that's for sure. And when you look at the gut, it's the same kind of thing. You wipe it all out, it's not going to come back in just a week or two or a month. It may take years to restore that normal that normal ecosystem that's there that protects us from so many illnesses.
The other article that came out just recently was about a pregnant mother's breast milk and how it's influenced by her gut bacteria.
Right.
So that the babies need to have the proper amount of probiotics as well.
Oh, for sure. If you try and replace mother's milk with infant formula, you're in for a shock. And we have a video on the site on drsaputo.com. And if you put infant formula in it, it'll probably come up with many others on the same topic. And you can see how complicated that is. You have to be naive and not know much about this topic to think that infant formula is going to come anywhere close to the thousands of things that are in mother's milk.
However, if a mother is unable to breastfeed, I'm hoping that the baby formula companies will catch on to this and maybe add a few probiotics into the formula.
Exactly. So when we look at the stool as an organ with more metabolic activity than any organ system in the body, and it is very much at the mercy of what we eat and the kinds of things that we're exposed to in the environment, we're going to have to think twice before we start using antibiotics so liberally, particularly when we take them orally, or being exposed to foods that are not healthy or foods that have things in them that are toxic. So what you put in your mouth isn't just what makes you up, it's what makes this whole organ up, which you're in a very close relationship with and you must have if you're going to be healthy.